Hello, folks. Welcome to the Season 74 SBA Entry Draft presentation. Today's proceedings will be presented by none other than myself, of course, since I'm already talking. My name is Star, and the supreme analyst for today's Entry Draft show is Tomato. Hello and welcome.
Hi, everyone. Happy to take part in this wonderful event.
All right, the season 73 SBA playoffs are long behind us now. Congratulations to the champions, Houston Ravens, who beat, I believe, the Vancouver Wolverines once again in the finals. They also have two picks in this first round of the SBA entry draft. But what we're most excited about is the top two picks, since they still currently belong both to the same team in the Oklahoma City Rampage. What are your first thoughts on the draft board here, or the draft order rather?
Well, I think the top two picks being owned by the same team is a gigantic win for OKC, as they need to stock up on new style of players, and picking them both at the same time guarantees a sort of fit that it's hard to get otherwise. San Diego, top three pick also, very nice, coupled with a late one. Curious to see Houston so low. They usually manage to weasel their way up.
Yeah, as Oklahoma City Rampage player on my second player, my Malone Freeman, I'm also actually quite interested to see what comes of this. Who do you think are some of the top prospects here in the upcoming SBA entry draft? Of course, the Fort Lauderdale Lightning won the SPDL championship just then, and they have a couple of uncapping players headed into the draft. What are your thoughts on the top prospects for the entry draft?
I think all of Fort Lauderdale is a great pick. It's a wonderful team that always manages to grow massive talent. There's some players from very respected agencies, also like the Zeke That Beast agency that has multiple times now created great players. Roman Rose lately in the SBA. I think there's worth checking that one out. A lot of older agencies have seen a resurgence. There's a Renomitsu player, there's a Pingu player. It's a great season to have a lot of draft picks in.
Right, and that makes me a very proud grandfather figure myself, since if Pingu and Renomitsu are considered older agencies, I would like to hear no more of the seniority talk. Yes, some of those players mentioned there, of course, from the Lightning, Katsei Ninare won the SPDL Playoffs MVP award. Emidas is a power forward slash center player. His players recently have been a little bit lower on the totem pole, as the days of ultimate tryharding, I guess, have been behind him for some 2 years now, but the players have still been quite high quality, and even one of them, or all of them, have been nominated on the Hall of Fame ballots. But without further ado, I hear the number one pick is in, and we're gonna kick off our SBA entry draft show without any further ado. With the first overall selection, the Oklahoma City Rampage retain their selection and select Dags Biggs. Oh, that's a lot more difficult to say out loud than I would have thought. From the Fort Lauderdale Lightning, a center power forward player, very high on the TP totem with the returning DB25 player agency. A tough inside scoring big man. What are your thoughts on this selection, Tomato?
I mean, it's almost natural, isn't it? Kendon Pafanian is getting older now, so this is a perfect replacement for him as a big man. And what's more, with Oklahoma having another pick soon to come, there's a very natural pairing here ready on the draft board. I'm sure our viewers have already noticed and are just waiting for the next one as well. But Dax Biggs, even by himself, is a great player coming from France. Amazing scorer, great at rebounding, just the modal big man, perfect to take the SBA by storm.
I'm just going to give you all the band-aid wound here, rip it off, and yes, indeed, the Oklahoma City Rampage with the second overall selection also retained that pick and select Kenza Godo out of the Quad City Asylum. As you mentioned, as Dax Biggs was almost like a perfect selection there, they also get the natural pairing with a young point guard, shooting guard, triple-double machine with a lot of versatility. What do you think about this future now with Kenza Godo and Dax Biggs in the fold for the Oklahoma City Rampage?
I think the sky is the limit here. Both players are amazing. They'll be joining some great, also still young players on the roster already. With the big man role filled by Dax Biggs, Kenza is just the perfect pairing, as you said. Supreme passer, great rebounder, plays hard defense, is very quick on the floor, doesn't need to score as much with such great partners on the court. I'm just looking forward to seeing them take the league by storm.
Yes, already, like I mentioned, my player Malone Freeman on the Oklahoma City Rampage, but also another very high scorer or a very gifted scorer, Sailor Moon of the Beowulf agency, already on the roster. So the timeline is for now set with these picks for the Oklahoma City Rampage, and their future, I guess, couldn't be any brighter at this point. Do you have now any hopes for who the San Diego Corsairs could pick with the... Oof. That's cool.
Okay, I need to... yep, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Everyone will like that. Everyone likes dogs. Since there's a lot of candidates who might have been mocked in the mock drafts to go first overall still on the board, who's your pick for the San Diego Corsairs here?
I think the Corsairs are in a weird position. They have some older players, some younger players, just a lot of them on the roster, really. They don't have any clear needs, so I would just take the best play on the board, so either J.R. Glock or Obadiah Christ at this point.
All right. Well, I'm hearing the next pick is indeed in once more, and we're gonna reveal here, indeed, Obadiah Christ goes to the San Diego Corsairs with the third overall selection. A very gifted playmaking and shooting point guard slash small forward player of Maddy Live 3K as making, I guess is the word. On the Tampa Bay Crusaders, didn't get much recognition early in the season with their offense having a lot of trouble getting going, but after the All-Star break, the team also got a bit of a lift, and Obadiah Christ also polished his draft stock with the very high TP numbers, and I believe we also have a message from the San Diego Corsairs general manager, Theories. All right, so having selected a young point guard prospect many consider to be a lock in the top two, what are your thoughts with the direction of the Corsairs with Obadiah Christ manning the show? We asked Theory, and his response was, given how I have now been attempting to rebuild San Diego, I think that the addition of Obadiah Christ is a great one. In fact, the potential he has as a playmaker, both at the point guard and the small forward positions, can really open up things for the rest of the players on the court, even Quinn herself. I have had experience with having multiple players who were really good at distributing on the court at the same time, and in our discussions we were able to come to an agreement regarding our mutual goals for the season and beyond. In short, I like the direction that we're headed with Obadiah Christ, and I think that the fans are going to realize that we have something special here in the making starting today. So yeah, you suggested this pick might be on the card, so are you in agreement here fully with the what the theory is making out to be of this pick.
Well, I agree. If any one of you knows me from my GMing days, I'm a fan of a lot of playmaking on the team, and playmaking is something Obadiah does very well, while at the same time managing to keep his turnovers relatively low for such high usage. I think it's a great pick.
With no movement in the top 3, we now actually have a trade alert here. The Houston Ravens, like you suspected, are actually moving into this draft higher from their 10th overall position and are receiving Miami Vice's 4th overall selection, so they will be on the clock. The trade details in full are that they gave out the 10th overall selection, 19th overall selection here, and next season's first rounder unprotected to the Miami Vice. We can discuss the specifics of this afterwards, but let's see who the player the Ravens selected will be. All right, the 4th overall selection to the Houston Ravens, it's Christian Lexul. Christian Lexul is a small forward, power forward, combo forward type of player who had extremely high rebounding numbers this season in the SBDL and has a lot of defensive talent with not so much offensive talent yet, but in the typical Houston way, I believe that's going to be polished over time, and Lexul will be a great depth piece while he hones his craft. What's the immediate reaction here for you, Tomato?
Just ideal Houston player, really. They have the monsters already, and Gunnar Gonzalo and Coffee and Count Olaf and all that. What they needed was the utility type that they so like to have on their squads, and this is what Lexel brings to the table: a lot of rebounding, a lot of athletic ability, some defense. Great player.
Yes, just an apology to Crazy Ralph here. I wasn't. That's the first player I wasn't able to find a correct player render for. So I believe this is Sterling Brown representing your player here. Get onto that so we can make future draft presentations much better and more accurate if you guys want to have a certain player represent you. But I'm hearing there's another trade. This time it's the Milwaukee Maulers coming into the draft. They are trading away Javon DeVaughn, that's a cool name, to the Los Angeles Rush, who held the 5th overall selection here, and also are giving up their first round selection. Before we move on to the selection, then is there a player on the board you would be this you would pay this price for? Do you think this is still fair value? Because a lot of people consider this a very, very, very good draft class either way. So I believe it's a very good trade for the Maulers if they have specifically a player in mind here.
Yeah, if at this point the player that the Maulers really want is still on the board, I think it's a great trade for them. LA apparently does not want to pick in this draft. They're willing to bet on next year, which is fine. But I think it could end up a win-win if next year's draft turns out well for the Rush.
Just a quick 10-15 seconds on, do you think this price is a higher price or a lower price or equal value for what Houston paid for their right to select number 4?
I think this trade is pretty equal in value. I think it's good for both sides. I think Houston got a steal, as they often do. They only gave up later picks and their own pick next year, which also probably won't be very good. And the Maulers pick next year could be okay-ish. We won't know.
Yeah. There's still a lot of off-season to go. So, with the 5th overall selection in the Season 74 SBA entry draft, animated MRI machine is headed to the Milwaukee Maulers up north. They also need their high standard of healthcare and hospital equipment, medical equipment. So Renomitsu returning to the SBA and getting drafted quite high, and already Milwaukee proving they value animated MRI machine by trading for the pick, a power forward slash shooting guard player out of the Henderson Honey Badgers, a defensive specialist so far in his short career, or its short career. Not sure about that one, but curiously enough, was playing off the bench for, I think, the majority, if not all, of the SBDL season. So for the reasons of that are unknown, but I believe he'll be a very good, or it'll be a very good contributor to the team next season already. What do you think about the player?
I think it's a very similar case to Lexo for Houston. It's just a great utility pick to pair alongside Blaze Carter, just to let him feast on the offensive end and let the animated MRI machine do their work on defense and rebounding and all this stuff.
Yes, I believe as well a very similar thought process behind it, whereas the Milwaukee Maulers name doesn't have quite the cachet as the Houston Ravens one does now. The thought process here, I think, is extremely similar, even though the timelines are, well, they're quite similar still for both the pro teams here. Congratulations to Renomitsu returning to SBA in great form, and we'll head on over to the next draft selection here. With the 6th overall selection in the SBA entry draft of season 74, Toronto Thunderbirds select Jaden Jabbarkapa. And this one is a doozy, since Jabbarkapa set all kinds of records throughout his SBDL career, breaking the all-time scoring record and becoming the first player, of course, to also reach 10,000 points scored in the SPDL in his 3-year career. A 7'1" center from the Quad City Asylum as well. What are your thoughts then with Jabbarkapa beginning maybe a new era in Toronto with his talents from day one?
I think that's exactly what the aim here is. On Toronto, Tom Baker is slowly getting old. He's gonna need to have someone ready to take his place. And even though Jabbarkapa is a big, he's a very, very tall center, he is going to slot into that space perfectly, ready to go from the get-go. From the very first game he's gonna play, he's gonna score a ton of buckets. I think he's a player to watch out for, even despite being so young at this point.
Yes, there's been quite a few of these players who come into the league young and hungry to score a lot of points, but for some players it takes a bit more time than the others, and I think it all depends on the team composition, and Toronto has sort of an in-between factor here with their older players soon moving out of the way for Jabbarkapa and the younger generation they're going to push in. And thus, we move on to the 7th overall selection. The New York Rails select Kayin Oze out of the Thunder Bay Resistance. That's a cool looking player there. Kayin Oze of the previously mentioned Seek the Beast agency, point guard / small forward, 6'5", nearly average a triple-double in this past SBDL season, was the focal point for a Thunder Bay team who didn't impress much outside of Okeke and Ose. What do you think of this selection and how it's going to shape up the New York Rail in the future now?
Well, I have a lot of faith in the Rail, and I think Osei is a great pick here because at this point in time, they don't really have a lot on the roster, and Osei is a player who will do a lot. He's doing a little bit of everything at this point. We still don't know what his plans are for the future and how he's going to shape up, but I think he's got great potential. He's from a great agency, and he's just gonna come in hungry and ready to work.
Yes, and as the player profile or prospect profile page here proves, with the averages just based on the counting stats here, it's one of the more impressive ones we've had in a while. I believe led the league in rebounding, 16.8 points, and as I said, almost average triple double. Then also only 3 turnovers and 3 steals per game. So that's, yeah, this is one of the top prospects for me in this season, and it's a great selection for the Rail at this stage of the draft. Then moving on to the 8th overall selection, the Arizona Inferno select Asher Moxley, and I must admit, even though I'm the host here, I don't know anything about this player other than he's a straight to the draft player, and I respect Evans a lot, as he has had multiple successful players. So what are your expectations for Arizona and Moxley as a pairing here?
I think at this point it's gonna be very hard to judge Moxley before we see him play. But Evans has always brought up great players into the league, and I'm sure this one will also be exactly that. And I think Seattle is a place that could be a great start for his career. They're also the kind of team that has a bunch of everything, a large spread of ages for the players. So we'll see how he shapes up and what the place in the team will be for him.
Yeah, excuse Tomato here, he said Seattle, even though it was Arizona selecting mostly. But much of the same applies. I would say it's just more of a slip, since it sounded like you were talking about Arizona, but you just said Seattle on accident.
I was just looking. Yep.
Yeah. Here we committed a bit of overseas or whatever. G-League, no, not G-League Ignite, what the other different one was. Overtime elite scouting, passing, ball handling, 3-point shooting, and stealing are expected to be strengths for Asher Moxley. So a point guard prospect, also able to play small forward. Speaking of Seattle then, with the 9th overall selection, the Seattle Knights select Kaze Ninare. Kaze, I think it's in Japanese, not Kaze. That would be very American, just say Kaze Ninare. Sorry for all the American viewers here. The reigning SBDL playoffs MVP. Like we mentioned earlier, power forward / center player out of the Fort Lauderdale Lightning. Then, speaking of fits and Seattle, do you think we could just copy and paste what you said previously then for Kaze Ninare, or is there something more definitive here?
I mean, it's definitely easier to talk about Kaze here because we've actually seen him play.
Yes.
I do believe that he's gonna shape up great. He has a strong athletic ability. He has scored some. He's rebounded some. He's just ready to ball. I think a place like Seattle would be great for him to just kind of have that space to take a running start, because he is a bit behind in terms of TPE. And there's a bunch of players already ready to be those starters, so he can take his time as a sixth man, or maybe just bump someone down to the bench and he takes over a starter spot. We never know.
Excellent. All right, with the 10th overall selection then, it's Miami Vice selecting Vincent Fox Daniels out of Louisville in the SBDL as well. A small forward / shooting guard prospect, 6'7" wing, scored extremely high this season, but there's been quotes from the player himself in the media saying that's not the type of player I'm going to be in the pro leagues. With the dearth of talent in the Louisville system, I was just pigeonholed into doing the most. So, with that in mind, what do you think about Miami getting a very cool, versatile player here at this pick?
I think it's exciting. It's an exciting pick to get a guy that even when it's not his specialty, he's just ready to step up to whatever was needed. But Miami has a lot of youth on the roster, so I really think Vincent could be the piece to fill in the gaps here.
Then, with the 11th overall selection in the season 74 SBA entry draft, the Brooklyn Bullets select Soj or Soge. Oh, there's Jonas Repko, so it must be. Anyway, Soj King, also a straight to the draft player, or is he? Yes. I didn't see him play last season in the SPDL, and I am in charge of that. So strengths are provided as 3-point shooting, quickness, stealing, perimeter defense. What's the situation now for Brooklyn after some seasons removed from their championship and this new player they're picking up here with a very high TP total?
Well, I think it's a great situation for Brooklyn now because they have their core three of Damian Velk, Ahmad Kofi, and Tiny Congo just ready to go. Already, despite the disappointing regular season last year. I think Soge will be great for them because they already have the big things filled up. They have scoring, they have defense. So a player who can shoot the free, who can defend, who's very quick on the court as Soge is, I think it's going to be a great fit here.
Right, and a very, well, I can't say common, but a delightful build as a shooting guard small forward. Certainly a player type I personally have come to dislike over the years, but many people have made lemonade out of, I guess, their lemons. And shooting guards have had much of a renaissance in the past 15, even, well, I guess at this point, 30 seasons of SBA basketball. So it's going to be nice to see Brooklyn get a new young star with a high TP total. Then I believe we have a trade here. The Las Vegas Jokers are receiving the 12th overall selection and will thus be on the clock in trade for Wally Winchell. What's your thoughts on this then, Tomato?
Well, normally I would maybe not be so hot on this trade, but considering some of the players that are still left on the board, ready to be picked, I think this could be a steal of the season.
Right, and what do you think about Wally Winchell's future now in Los Angeles? They're having already made a trade previously for Javon DeVaughn.
It's interesting. I'm not really sure what Los Angeles is planning on. They have some youth. They seem to be trying to maybe, if not compete, then just not be bad, which is interesting.
Yeah, I personally am a very big fan of that approach to things and not being bad if you can help it. Then with the 12th overall selection, the Las Vegas Jokers are selecting J.R. Glock, who many would have pegged for a top 2 pick previously, and even you suggested as a possible pick there at number 3 for San Diego, if I'm not wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, just making sure I remember correctly. So J.R. Glock already clocking in at 503 TP by the time of, I guess, past Sunday or Monday. Point guard, small forward prospect. A lot of interest, a lot of hype, a lot of entertainment past season in the SBDL, including us trying to figure out or me suggesting nicknames for Glock, and they all being rejected, so I just resorted to calling him Glock. But what do you like about this selection then for the Jokers, other than picking possibly the best prospect this low in the draft?
I mean, I do have to say that it's a little bit crazy to see J.R. Glock fall in so low in the draft. I think it's an absolute steal. Um, but for the player himself, I think he's a great scorer and very efficient at the SBDL level. We rarely see these volume type scorers in the D League getting close to that 0.6 mark in true shooting. He does turn over the ball a lot, but considering his usage on the Hydra, I think that's understandable. I think this will go down in history as one of very crazy trades happening this offseason and possibly the biggest steal of recent memory.
Right. Yeah, I believe we could have done a bit more foreshadowing on who the possible player targets are for Las Vegas with this pick, but of course, with the format we have here, that would have just been sort of spoilerish. I just think this is a great pick, and Las Vegas Jokers now have maybe. Well, I think this is like 4 of the 5 or 6 of the 10 best late round or second round selections in all of SBA history that I've been around. So hats off to them, and best of luck to Glock and Hollywood Living in Las Vegas. And up next, another trade alert. Here we do have a 3-team trade between the Philadelphia Prowlers, who are receiving the 13th overall selection, the next draft selection from Mexico City. They are also receiving in trade the A-Train, and Mexico. How did I say Mexico City and then Mexico? Well, I guess it's good to be multicultural inside your own head. Also receive Knox Bloodfall, and then the New York Rail are in on the action, receiving 2 separate first round selections in next season's draft. Knox Bloodfall, of course, highly touted prospect, and the A-Train, fun player, but yeah. What do you think immediately about this trade, then, Tomato?
I mean, it's obvious that the Prowlers want to make a splash this season. They're trading for an old but very good player in the A-Train. And the Rail, using the occasion to stock up on future picks, always a good choice to make. And the Mexico's trying to go young, try and get some great prospects in. I think it's a good trade for everyone involved, honestly.
Yeah, and if the viewers here haven't been keeping track at home on their SBAO pages, they'd be surprised to hear that the next player selected, who will be with the 13th overall selection, the Prowlers select Ton Redding out of the Quad City Asylum, and still here we are at 472 TP this late into the draft. So it's pretty crazy the quality of talent on board here, and Commander Walrus with his small forward / power forward defensive specialist player also has a lot of shooting talent and the typical stuff that we've already seen in this draft with Lexul and Fox Daniels. Then for Prowlers, how does Redding fit into their plans of the future, Tomato?
Considering they just pick up the A-Train in that trade moments ago, Talon is gonna have to get ready to hit the floor running, really.
Yeah.
These defensive specialist types are known to do that, honestly, very well in the SBA, because it's the sort of skill that transfers very, very, very quickly. I think Philadelphia might surprise some people next season. I'm excited to watch them go.
Yeah, excited as am I. Moving on then to the 14th overall. I can't imitate the old sounds from the NBA draft events. But we have another trade, Tony Silvestri going to the Brooklyn Bullets in exchange to the St. Louis Italian first, which is the on the clock 14th overall selection. Well, just it's already on its way, so we're gonna take a look at the player being selected. It's Matthias Gravenberg. The Dutch are weird. I can't remember the correct form for it, but Matthias, also from Quad City Asylum, Steve-O's center/power forward player. Very good rebounding and blocking numbers this past season in the SBDL. What are your thoughts, Tomato, on this splash Charlotte are making here, moving away from Silvestri and now getting in a grinding defensive specialist?
Very interesting here. They're going younger. They're making space for CCC to shine, and I think it's a good move if they're not planning on trying to compete this season. Then going young and getting a great pick like this in the draft is a wise choice. Gravenberg, just like Redding before him, is a defensive specialist. Always good pick. Always ready to hit the floor running. Less of a shooter this time around, but more of a rebounder. I think it's going to be a great fit for Charlotte. I'm excited to see what they do. They've been known to make some wise moves, and I'm sure this one will turn out to be just the same.
Yes, and at this point of the draft, I must mention the intrigue it's going to be over the next few seasons, seeing these prospects grow and round out their games more, since we have a lot of players, power forward and center players, who are defensively oriented at the draft, and also we have the few at the top who are extremely offensively oriented. So what comes of them in the next 3-4 years and how they develop and at which times, that's going to be very interesting to see and learn and get a few tips for myself on maybe making a next Hall of Fame player in the future. But we have a draft pick in, and with the 15th overall selection, the Las Vegas Jokers select Jehu King. And I guess the quality of player is still not going down at all, because we have one of the MVP candidates and certainly Henderson's star man of the past SBDL season, power forward, small forward, 6'9". What does this now mean for the Jokers getting Glock and getting King now to round out their draft here?
I think the Jokers are the winners of this SBA draft. For me personally, they've made great moves. They've gotten two amazing players, ready to slot in next to their already great young core that they're building, while still remaining a competitive team with the roster they already have. I think it's just some great GMing here, and I'm very impressed with the moves they've made.
Yes, and if I previously said that with Glock they have some of the best late round selections, Jehu King might in time also feature on that list, and since there is a lot of talent to come from him as well, I believe. Then we move on to the next draft pick in the season 74 draft. With the 16th overall selection, the San Diego Corsairs are once again on the clock, and they're selecting Theodore Walker out of the Tampa Bay Crusaders. Theodore Walker, like mentioned previously, or not sure if I mentioned previously directly, but a teammate of Obadiah Christ in the SBDL, and now a future teammate of Obadiah Christ in the pro leagues as well. So Theodore Walker led the team in scoring, while Christ was the premier point guard, table setter, doing the dirty work, playmaking, keeping things steady in general after the All-Star break especially. We asked Thierry, the San Diego general manager, his thoughts on reuniting these two players now in the pro leagues as well. to be honest, I didn't think he would follow this far. It's kind of a disruption to certain plans, but I definitely would love to keep him in San Diego's colors. Given our conversations with him, I assumed other teams had an eye on him and he'd be gone by our pick here. Regardless, I am very happy to have had the chance to draft him and hopefully we'll be able to see him put in work in the SBA for us. So yeah, not sure if Thierry is here alluding to some sort of a cap crunch or irresistible offers from elsewhere, but what's your thoughts then on this selection, Tomato?
I mean, I think Thierry said it great. It's surprising to see him so low, considering how great of a player he is. Another highly efficient scorer with skills in other areas as well. I think just seeing Walker so low is just shows how amazing this draft was. Just how many great players there were ready to be grabbed. Truly a very impressive event here.
Yeah, 415 TPE is, I would say, nothing to sneeze at. And at 16th pick, some other years that would be in the top 6, unfortunately. Here we have the current draft board. The next 3-4 selections are Vancouver Wolverines selecting Shosuke Higashikata, Thunderbird selecting Meika Obi, Miami Vice selecting Pink Panda, and San Diego once again selecting almost zero speed hacks. Why we don't have a player profile on them is because they are fillers and they're if you're new or unfamiliar, they're not going to develop, they're just there to make ranks. So I believe the rest of these teams didn't have the sufficient cap space or interest in these couple of remaining players who went undrafted, unfortunately. So I'm not going to speculate on these players' inactivity status or activity, whatever earning point as they make. We're just here. Yeah, so I'm going to do a little bit of familiarizing here to you, the viewer, and to Tomato on these couple of remaining players, and then he can give his thoughts on if the potentially rebuilding teams next season should take a look at these players. So first, here on the screen, we have Josiah Hendricks, who became very well known in the past SPDL season for shooting sometimes 40-45 times per game, and he also scoring sometimes 40-45 points a game. Ended up with 38 points per game and 51.8 true shooting percentage. So for a 370 P player, obviously not too bad. Then up next, we also had Trey Daniels of the Belmont Barons. That came very French. Also a shooting guard / small forward, only 5'6", but didn't let that bother him at all, grabbing 11.3 rebounds per game in the SBDL, and also finished with a 53.8% true shooting a lot of 3-pointers and making a ton of them as well. And then we also have the Jurupa Valley Jackals' Fernando Ramirez. That's a good looking player there as well. Jurupa Valley Jackals went to the SBDL finals just then, but they were firmly beaten by the Fort Lauderdale Lightning. But it must be said that they wouldn't have been anywhere close to the finals without the performances of Fernando Ramirez, who averaged nearly 25 points, a lot of rebounds, 12.2 to be exact, with very high efficiency, 56.4, and single-handedly won them a lot of games where the team had a trouble scoring. So apologies to Joshi, Dan, and Riley L on not being drafted. And if you're watching this in the future or whenever this comes out or the next week, I'm rooting for you to find a team next season in the SBA. So just then before we go, I'm gonna scroll back to the final draft results here. Yeah, so let's just talk about the complete picture here. You mentioned previously that the Las Vegas Jokers are probably the winners of this draft, but it can't be overstated that the Oklahoma City Rampage got to pick at number 1 and number 2 and decisively got the players they wanted, since they didn't make any moves up or down. Well, up would have been very difficult. So what are some other things you noticed or wanted to bring up here as we look at the final draft results of season 74?
I think, as I said previously, I did mention Las Vegas being the winners here, but that's mostly considering what they were coming into the draft with, which is not
Yes.
much. But I do think Houston, as usual, managed to get exactly what they needed and wanted. I think Brooklyn made some nice moves. They got pick with a player they needed, and they traded their pick away for a great player from Charlotte. I think San Diego fans can be pretty damn happy that they managed to snag not only a top 3 recruit, but also player who many might have touted to go higher than 16,
Yeah. Yeah, I think nearly it's difficult to say who didn't do a good job here, because that's the mystery of the draft as well. Like, anything can happen in the next 6 weeks, 6 months, that could change our opinions on this. But just on the surface level, it feels like getting Theodore Walker and Obadiah Christ, even though San Diego are in a very difficult financial situation, is great business. Oklahoma City making good use of their 2 picks at the top is great business. Seattle getting a high quality player that was already proven to be one of the best in the SBDL at 9 is great business. Toronto getting the top all-time scorer in the developmental league at 6, that's arguably even greater or better business. So it's very difficult to find any flaws in this so far, and I don't have anything but praise for most of the players and most of the teams here.
Yeah, I agree completely. Just great moves by great teams, picking up great players.
And hopefully all that continues into the next season. But for now, we thank you very much for watching. From me and from Tomato.
Hope to see you all next year.
And hope to be here next year. Thanks everyone, and talk to you again